Choose a family. Choose a big television.
You're a quiet, sensitive type. A little bit crazy, a little bit bad.
Choose sitting on that couch watching mind-numbing, spirit-crushing game shows, stuffing junk food into your mouth.
The man is a psycho, man. He's a mate. So what can you do?
What are you two talking about?
Football! What are you talking about?
Shopping.
Jay's the soul of Detroit.
You asked it around you, the country around my face. It's gone.
What are you doing? Come on.
That is not paid for by them. That is paid for by the people of Detroit.
You are qualified, Emil.
I'm not qualified for this job.
Let me tell you something. You want to go right now? Okay? You want to go right now?
All right, it's not ML Elric. Hello, boys and girls. It's Mark Fellhauer with you, along with Sean Windsor, the soul of Detroit. I chose that intro today, and I can't believe, Sean, it took you that long to realize what movie it was. It's
about 20 seconds. By the way, I'm not the soul of Detroit. You made it sound like, with the punctuation, that I'm the soul of Detroit. I am not. He is missing.
He is missing, and ML Elric is in Scotland right now with the family. Claims he's going to be joining us via Zoom. He just landed in a place called Shetfield. Shetfield? I don't know. Shetland?
Shetland.
Is that a place?
It is. Islands north of the British Isles, right? It was a TV show set there. It's probably why he's there.
Maybe that's where the ponies come from.
I asked him to bring me one back.
He refused.
What
I want to know is why he goes on vacation and doesn't let us go on vacation.
I went on vacation. I go on vacation.
Did you?
Yeah, you're gone plenty of times. So
really? Not really.
Well, mentally. I want to bring in our special guest of the day, filling in for us, a current Emmy-nominated broadcaster.
That means a lot.
and you're coming up on your, I guess, would be 50th year in broadcasting, right? Because you said you started here in 1974.
Yep.
It's Eli Zaret.
WABX, which was a FM rock station. Back when FM was really underground, you couldn't get it in your car unless you went down to Mickey Shore or a place like that and bought a converter. You'd screw it into the bottom of your dash, and you could use your AM dial to find FM stations. So it was a very different day and age.
I don't like how you just brushed off that Emmy nomination.
Oh, well,
you should be very proud of that.
I am. I hadn't entered anything in a long time because I haven't been on local television, believe it or not, since 1995. But I've won several since then. One was I worked for the Pistons, and I did a documentary on autism about 10 years ago. But it isn't a national Emmy. It isn't the kind that Bob Costas gets. It isn't the type that award-winning TV shows get. It's a Michigan Emmy.
It's so unusual to have self-deprecation in it.
Instead of the self-aggrandizing.
Exactly.
I think ML is self-deprecated. He's deprecating. He's also very sensitive, though. So most self-deprecating people aren't hypersensitive at the same time.
Well, that's true.
Do you have any idea who your opponents are in this Emmy Award?
Yes.
You do?
Well, only two entities qualified because each state sends the entries to a different market, so there's no prejudice. And so it isn't like they're going to have 5 in one category. They may have 10 in one category if they're all deemed Emmy worthy. But in the documentary category, only our thing called Going For It, the rise of WDIV, which is the first station I worked at. And it was in celebrating its 75th anniversary. It was the first station in Detroit.
I hear it's wonderful.
You son of a bitch. I tell you.
I have seen it. You got so upset because nobody had seen it for a while, but I think we're all
I understand.
Even Sean's seen it.
Yes. By the way, Eli still has the voice, right, Mark?
Eli is still a fantastic broadcaster.
The voice is...
There was some trepidation today because he wanted to know exactly what we were going to talk about. Because he loves to be prepared, which is one of the things I love about him. And I said, don't worry about it. I got it covered. We got it covered.
Preparation is the key. So anyway, the documentary is about the 75-year history of the station. And the only other thing we're up against that qualified was a PBS thing that Keith Famey and others did, which is on Detroit churches.
Yeah.
But it all depends. If they sent the Emmy nominate or the Emmy entries to a Bible Belt town, they might like the fact that it's
guy
about
from
Detroit
Survivor?
churches, and they don't care really about the history of television in Detroit.
Are you worried that a guy from Survivor might have a higher Q rating than you?
I'm really not worried about anything.
You don't worry about much.
I'm excited that I still fit into the tuxedo I bought back in the early 80s.
Now, that's
I have to wear it.
impressive.
Well, I like you self-describe yourself, which that's redundant. You described yourself as a historian. So there are a couple things I want to ask you about regarding your career and 50 years, very impressive, and all the things you've seen, especially covering sports, which I love how, and Sean, you're the same way. Athletes are no more special than the person that lives next door or you walk by down the street, other than their athletic ability. They're not these deities. They're not these gods.
I think it goes a little bit deeper than that. I don't know whether you'd say that because,
Thank you.
Dennis Rodman is an idiot, but he's also a genius in one thing. And
Sure.
you only really have to do one thing very well
Aren't most
to make it in
humans?
life. But by the same token, it takes more than just the athletic ability. You have to understand what it's like to be on a team. You have to understand what it's like to work with other people, to have a boss, to listen, to be part of something. So, but yes, in terms of expecting moral behavior or that there are examples of other things that you value is a
models.
waste because you'll be disappointed every time.
Or that they get to skip processes that the rest of us don't. That's just not true. In fact, my colleague Carlos Monarez and I were arguing about this a couple of weeks ago with Jamison Williams, the young receiver from the Detroit Lions, who was suspended for 6 games because he was caught gambling on a phone app, I assume, and somewhere on Lions property. And Carlos is trying to make the point that no, because you have that contract, because you have that money and that expectation, you should somehow be different. I'm like, no, if you're 22, your brain chemistry is wired a certain way, like most young people, and you have to live through lots of things to experience and how to navigate. Money is not going to change how your brain is wired. It's just not. To your point.
I cannot believe I'm going to say this, but I kind of agree with Carlos. There's greater expectations, though.
It doesn't matter if you're immature. If you're immature and you've got to learn some things about life, nothing will change that other than learning those things about life. Money will not change that. That's been my experience writing about sports for 20 plus years.
Well, that's a pretty complex question. First of all, in terms of Jameson, the Lions admitted, and I think there's some validity there, that this really wasn't carefully explained in detail, and everyone who listened was made to understand exactly what was told them. And so there's been a lot of confusion about, well, I make bets on my app, so how do they know where I am, or why does it matter? Or was it really said you can gamble on your phone any place you want as long as it isn't in these few locations? Was that really explained that well? I'm not going to excuse him, but it seems like there's a lot of vagueness in there.
No, there's no question. But my question to both of y'all then is if you're 21 or 22 or whatever, and you've been around this, you've been around sports a lot longer than I have, Eli. If you see the different levels of maturity that come into the NFL, the NBA, the Major League Baseball, whatever, the money is not going to expedite that maturity. It just doesn't.
In fact, it makes it worse. It can make it worse.
No, it absolutely can.
It can teach a lack of responsibility, a lack of self-preservation, a lack of knowledge of it, of what money really is and what it means and how it plays a role in your life. What's real? That's why a lot of athletes think they're wealthy when all they are is getting a good salary for a period of time. Yeah. And a lot of older people make that same mistake too. God, I think I'd run out of money, or I thought this is going to go on forever. So you're right. There's a level of maturity they have in certain ways, but lack in other ways, because you're still only 21 years old, and 21-year-olds are basically idiots. Let's face it. We were all idiots when we were 21.
And that's my point. You do get the occasional 21-year-old who's going on 40. You just do, right?
Well,
that's in all walks of life, not just athletes.
If you want your money to keep growing, if you're making a lot of money in a limited amount of time, you need to invest that money, right? And see what people can do for you. And the guy we recommend is Luke Nowak at Pinnacle Wealth. If you have questions about your financial future, if you're wondering if you're going to be able to reach those goals, give Luke a call, 248-663-4748. Free, consultation. He'll tell you if you want to be in bonds, equities, he'll help that money grow. So if you're an athlete or just a guy working hourly, day-to-day, have your money work for you with Luke Nowacki.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through Royal Alliance Associates Inc. Member FINRA-SIPC. Royal Alliance Associates Inc. is separately owned, and other entities and/or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Royal Alliance Associates Inc.
Now that kind of piggybacks, Eli, and something we were talking about before the show, and because we were talking about Brittany Griner, you brought her up yesterday on the Drew and Mike show, where you can hear Eli every Sunday, sometimes Monday, every first show of the week. How about that? And you were mentioning about what the difference was, and you've always called the NBA a Fleabag league in the 1970s.
It was a Fleabag league until, about after Bird and Magic came along, it became a major league. And my point is the whole Brittany Griner thing is so repulsive on so many levels. The first thing is the idiot who trolled her through the airport. What a weenie, what a little piece of shit he is. His name was Stein, I think, who's looking at the camera like, look at me, and hey, Brittany, did you fuck Vladimir Putin? Just stupid, antagonistic things, and he gets away with it. But what it pointed out to me is why, if this is a major league, are these players walking through an airport? If it's a major league, they should fly in their own plane. And I go back because, again, getting older makes you a historian whether you want it or not. And the NBA, until Pat Riley came along in the early 80s with the Showtime Lakers, he said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to stay at the Ritz-Carlton. Screw this Motel 6 stuff. We're going to get our own plane. And suddenly everybody said, whoa. And the league was starting to grow. David Stern was starting to make the international deals. Michael Jordan was still a year or two away, but you had Bird and Magic. And by the way, Sue Bird, who Megan Rapinoe said could be the greatest athlete of all time, isn't even the best bird of all time. She's only the second best bird in any case. But the point being is that helped the image of the NBA. We're a big-time league, and we care about the health of our players. So Bill Bradley, as I was telling Mark earlier, had to get up and Dave DeBusschere in the champion Knicks in 1970. I read Bill Bradley's book, Life on the Run. They had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get to the airport to sit in the waiting room there and get on a plane and go to the next place. But back then, you didn't have social media trolling them throughout the airport. So that's why it's kind of the WNBA is a minor league masquerading as a professional league,
and it's being supported by the NBA.
Right.
And I don't think that's. I mean, when you see Matt Ishbia had to buy the Phoenix Suns, he also when he bought the Phoenix Suns, he had to buy the Phoenix Mercury. It's kind of a package deal. I find it interesting that the WNBA's response to this is to change their charter flight rules because it costs more to charter flights, and because she's being harassed. They're like, yeah, I think you guys need to charter your flights now, where if they really cared about it, if it was a league making money, they would have done that all along. So my question is, at what point is this league going to fly on its own? Will it ever fly on its own?
Well, I think it may. I don't know what the real numbers are, but women's sports have come. I've seen them come from zero to where every effort is made to make them either a pure major league or to include women in all sports. Title IX made that every male athlete at a college, there has to be a female athlete. There has to be the same number. So we push it, and we've done our best, or they've done their best to make women a part of it. But still, if the revenue isn't there, because they don't play the game as well as men, and there isn't the same appeal, it's going to be kind of a minor league, and they can't afford to fly. And there has to be some type of fiscal responsibility, right? I mean, who's going to? Are you going to suck it up and take losses so that you look like a major league? And most fans don't know how you get from one game to another anyway. But
so is your opinion?
That's why Brittany Griner was in Russia in the first place, because she can't make a full-time living over here in the WNBA.
Please. No, she wants to make more money. I don't like that whole argument of she has to go over in there and play. She wants to go over there and play to make more money, which is fine. I mean, it's okay.
Well,
but to Eli's point, a lot of them don't make very much money at all in the WNBA.
And if you're the best in the world at what you do, you expect to get paid like the best do.
Yeah, it's not like they're making $500,000 a year in the WNBA to sit. If you're an eighth person on the bench,
sure,
and you're going to look to add another couple of $1 million in Russia or wherever. That's not the case. I don't think they're making anywhere near that.
Why does the NBA actively prop up and support the WNBA? Is this what people like to call virtue signaling? Is it to help their marketing? I mean, what is the real drive behind this, Sean?
It's a good question. I don't know if that's ever been answered.
I feel like that if they are hoping it'll eventually pop. To Eli's point, it has changed a lot. I mean, I know this is different because it's college, but look at the Final Four last year.
Right.
The women's side was much more compelling. That's been the case. There have been a couple other sports. Tennis comes to mind. That's the big. There have been plenty of years where Serena Williams outdraws, at least for an American audience, and that's largely because the American men haven't been part of the tennis scene.
Her pure dominance. I think people like to watch that.
Right. So
honestly, I think female tennis is more entertaining to watch than male tennis.
Can be.
Well, the way women are playing basketball right now, I mean, you watched Iowa, right?
Yeah. Well, college women's hoops has a distinct advantage, and then it's the uniforms that they wear, right? I will put Michigan on because I went to Michigan. I mean, it's that cult aspect of it. I'm not going to put on the Detroit. What were they called? The Detroit Shock because I live in Detroit.
It's a niche sport
Very
at this
much
point. It's not necessarily mainstream.
It just would take maybe some more stars coming in. The gal from Iowa. Why can't I think of her name? Caitlin Clark. Oh, yeah. If there's some more of that, Paige Buckers, who plays at Connecticut. I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep mentioning white gals, but
it's okay, Sean.
But
Angel Reese.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go, yeah.
But I mean, it's like any other sport. It's largely star driven, personality driven, and they may get to a point.
And give fans credit for understanding the different talent level. Now, Brittany Griner may be the most talented female player in America, but she couldn't last 1 minute in an NBA game. She'd be destroyed. It's a whole different level. So I think that has to do with the overall skill level and the and the artistry that they bring to the game.
That's the key, the artistry. Griner's game isn't exactly compelling and like Clark's game is, right? Or even Reese's game, or you mentioned Sue Bird earlier.
Yep.
I mean, these people have lots of ball skill that's pleasant to watch.
You talk about it being star-driven, and Eli mentioned Magic and Bird, and that really exploded the NBA. And I don't know if Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark are going to do that, but so much of this is star-driven in these sports. And another minor sport that is getting a lot of attention now is the MLS, Major League Soccer. And because the historian Eli is here today, I wanted to ask him the comparison of when Pele signed with the New York Cosmos, right? He played in Brazil professionally for a long time, won 3 World Cups. He's the same age that Lionel Messi is when Messi, who just turned down $1 billion from Saudi Arabia, turned down a lucrative contract from his club team that brought him up when he was, I think 12 years old in Barcelona, choosing to go to an MLS team, Inter Miami, because Adidas gave him extra money because he's an Adidas guy, because he gets a cut of all new subscriptions that Apple TV Plus gets for people that sign up. I don't know if it's just for MLS. Is he going to be transformative enough?
I'll tell you why that's so interesting, because when Pele came along, I think it was the late 70s, and this North American, NASL, the North American Soccer League, and back then, I'll go back a little bit, I grew up on Long Island, and they played soccer in high school. They didn't play soccer in high school in Michigan back in the 60s and 70s unless it was a prep school. But so many kids were starting to play it that even Howard Cosell said, the famous Howard Cosell, who anybody under 50 unfortunately has never heard of, which is another reason why being around a long time is kind of a negative, because the stuff that was important to you doesn't mean shit anymore to people. He said that the Soccer Bowl is going to be bigger than the Super Bowl in a period of time. Over 40 years has gone by, and soccer is still struggling, although it's doing better, to get a foothold, no pun intended, in this country. And it's a mystery as to me, well, all the kids who play, and all the high schools, and all the colleges, and the exposure on ESPN, that soccer is still, will Lionel Messi make Lionel Messi, pardon me to pronounce his name right, make MLS a major league sport in America? I don't know. It's still a niche sport. And my only explanation for why soccer hasn't caught on is because we Americans are used to the hand-eye coordination of pitching a baseball 100 miles an hour to a 2-inch target on the low outside corner, to hitting a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, to throwing a 60-yard pass. We're used to hitting a three-pointer, and you don't use your hands in soccer. to me, that's just for some reason seems to be the wall they can't get past.
But I think that's American soccer, right? I think to me, the bigger issue is that young people, especially in this country, understand one of the best soccer players football is played in the world. And I would bet, in fact, I remember writing a story about this a couple of years ago, the number of people in their 20s and teens that watch soccer versus baseball is much bigger. Yeah. It's just that they're watching the Premier League.
I think,
because baseball is tanking.
You're right.
We're talking about star power and lack of stars, right?
Baseball has zero of
it. It's fading from our culture a little bit, except for as an in-game experience.
I think for the MLS, it has two advantages that the Cosmos didn't have. And correct me if I'm wrong.
I saw Pele, by the way, in the 70s.
Did you?
Really? Yeah. With the Cosmos?
Yeah, he was in D.C., I want to say, because I lived in D.C. and they played soccer. When I moved to Illinois in the late 70s, nobody played soccer, to your point.
Yeah.
So why
hadn't moved off the East Coast.
Why didn't it make you a fan? Was it a novelty act?
It was fun to see him. I mean, I've always enjoyed the sport. I played the sport when I was young.
Everyone played the sport when they were young.
Right.
And I think they shift to football because it's the same, American football, because it's the same season as they get older.
Well, back in those days, I mean, the best soccer was obviously in Europe or in South America, wherever, but there was no way to watch it.
Well, I think
like there is now.
100%. I think TV and gambling has grown soccer like none other.
Did you guys see the story about the Athletic laying off the sports website? And
really? The New York Times.
Yeah.
They laid off 20 reporters yesterday. They're owned by the New York Times.
No kidding.
And in their story, they were talking about what they were going to focus on, the NFL and the Premier League, because that's where they get. This is a national website in this country.
Yeah.
And the second biggest chunk of their readership wants to read about soccer in Europe. Isn't that interesting?
That's kind of fascinating, but I think there's two reasons that. Number one, video games. The FIFA video game is huge.
For sure.
Kids play that, so they learn all the names. But then there is this thing, and Eli, you and I were talking about it off the air. You called it the browning of America. I mean, America's just browner now. There's a lot more Hispanics. There's more Asian people here that are, first generation, mainly second generation, that have brought the love of it with them.
In some markets, right, Orlando comes to mind. They have a very popular MLS team.
Miami.
Right.
Where Messi's going, and, a lot of Hispanics. The guy is from South America. They love him down there. Plays in Europe. Asia loves him too. The Middle East loves him. It has the possibility to grow the league. Will it?
Isn't a problem with soccer in America? This seems trite. There just aren't enough points.
100%.
There aren't enough points in the game.
That's a similar issue to baseball. But the markets where the MLS is popular, and again, I remember we've written a lot about this at the Free Press because there was, a push to bring a team here to Detroit at one point, are either to your point where there's a strong immigrant culture, or where it's a largely youngish, progressive kind of city like Portland.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's where, right? Because that's who, like Mark. Mark's a young progressive, and that's where
A, I'm not young. B, I would never describe myself as progressive.
And in baseball, if it's a 1-0 game, some people who aren't aficionados of the game will call it boring, whereas those who really understand the game will look at the tug and pull and the nuances that make it a compelling pitcher's duel. And maybe the sophistication isn't there to appreciate that in soccer. Hockey to the uninitiated, to me, always was, it's just one broken play after another.
Right. No.
Dice, broken play, come back, broken play, go back, broken play. Where's the continuity? That's why, basketball is encourage scoring. Football, they encourage scoring. Baseball, they make it so there's more scoring because as Americans, we like to see points.
No, the points are definitely an issue, or it's definitely part of it. But I also think there's some political layers of this, some identity layers, right? Soccer in some circles is seen as sort of not anti-American, but not of
possibly, but I think
not of us.
Not of us, and that's changing. That's changing a little bit.
I think it's.
But it's to your point. It was an East Coast sport for a long time. And when I was younger, soccer was seen as an elitist sport, played by kids of the upper middle class and so on and so forth. Whereas in Europe, it's a working man sport, first and foremost. Yeah. Same with cycling. My next door neighbor, who's from Amsterdam, couldn't believe when he moved to America that people thought of as cycling as an elitist sport when it's a working man sport in his country.
And how about it? Here's another one that was just as in fact, in the springtime when I was going to high school in the 60s, lacrosse was more popular than baseball.
Yeah, right.
Whatever happened to lacrosse?
Yeah, there's a professional league there that nobody ever watches. And speaking of elitists, and speaking of Europe, he is taking time out of his busy schedule. ML Elric has finally joined us. I guess Maybe you're not so leased. You're waiting for a bus?
You know, I go away for a week and we're talking about women's basketball, soccer, and I thought, how can it get any worse? And then Sean says cycling. What's that? Are we going to do pigeon racing as soon as I get on this damn bus?
You're over there where people use bikes, or maybe not. Not if you're in the Shetland Islands.
Why are you on the show anyway today? Can't you just enjoy the time with your? You don't trust us to be able to fill an hour?
Ego won't allow it.
You got nothing.
Sean, Mark told me I had to dial it.
Oh, bullshit!
Shit,
bullshit! You missed us.
And then he brought up women's soccer for people in iron lungs. And that's when I said, "What am I doing
the
here?"
setup. The setup was the historian aspect of it, because we have a living historian with us today. I'm going to make ML. I'm going to make you brought to us by. If you want a little European flavor, you can try out the Irish Coffee Bar and Grill. They're one of our newest sponsors. If you've ever been to the east side, though, you already know that they have the best burgers in town, located on Mack Avenue in Grosse Pointe. Irish Coffee is serving up those delicious ground rounds, just $5 Mondays, 5 to 11. So you got to remember, all the way next Monday, go there, 5 to 11 p.m. to get a burger for $5 at Irish Coffee Bar and Grill. Check out the fantastic Sloppy Joes they have today, Tuesday, and tomorrow, Wednesday. Whenever you go, you're going to find great food, great vibes. It's a classic Irish pub, and it's run by a Kennedy. Nothing more Irish than that. And when you see ML there, when he ever gets back from all his gallivanting around the world, be sure to ask him for an onion ring, because he'll have you buy him for him.
What's your tea time? Do you have a tea time at St. Andrews today?
No, but I'm hoping to see some puffins and some Shetland ponies and whatever other exotic things they have on tap here. But you're talking about Pele. For those of us who were growing up in Detroit at that time, Trevor Francis,
yes,
who was a great player for, I think it was Birmingham, when he came to town, you would actually sell a lot of tickets to see soccer at the Silverdome, because when Trevor Francis came, the Detroit Express, brought to you by Sonny Van Arnhem, were a fantastic draw. They were really exciting. When he wasn't here, dog shit.
What league was that? The NASL? Was that the North American Soccer League? I can't remember, because I covered Trevor Francis. There was a little bit of excitement for a moment. That was all around the time when the Silverdome also had the Panthers and they had the Express, and they played a playoff game at the Silverdome with Trevor Francis, and they lost, I think, on a kick in overtime or something. And I'll never forget how the players just laid out on the field, stunned, and what a dramatic moment it was. But it didn't last after that, for whatever reason.
I think it was an offensive explosion. Somebody lost 2-1 or something. The goaltenders had to be given fluids so they didn't cramp up and dehydrate from all the action.
Well, Mike's a soccer guy. Mike's a soccer investor. DCFC, I bet there are days when they outdraw the Tigers. That's not a joke.
I've been to those games. Very exciting.
Yeah. What do they have? 7,000 people there?
Yeah, 7,500, I think. Right?
I bet there are days. I bet Comerica occasionally does not get 7,500 people.
So a couple of years ago, they absolutely would have outdrawn the Tigers. But we came over here and we have these DCFC rugby shirts that we bought because we were going to our ancestral, I'm told, place in outside Aberdeen. So we all wore these matching rugby shirts. And then somebody told me that's exactly the same rugby shirt as one of the Harry Potter people wore. So we thought we were being cool. And I'm sure people are like, what's with these dorks? I'm like, no, DCFC. It's DCFC here. It's not Gryffindor or whatever the hell it is. But I don't know anything about Harry Potter.
Is that really like your ancestral home? I mean, can you really trace it back there?
I think so. I think my paternal grandfather left. I know he left Scotland in the 1920s, sometime around then. There's a lot of Elrics by Aberdeen. There's actually a little like neighborhood called Elric, and there's a place called House of Elric that makes gin in this fantastic old manor.
See, Sean, even when he leaves, he's got to dig in deeper and make it all about him and his history and where he's from.
Wait, are you actually in the Shetland Islands?
I was answering a question.
Are you?
Maybe something was lost in translation.
No, I set you up for it.
Let's humanize him a little bit, because you're a tourist looking at TV sites or filming locations for the Shetland.
Hell yeah,
TV series, right? That's fun.
What's the Shetland TV series? He's one of
So Eli, you don't know this, but these two guys watch shows that nobody else watches that are made in in Britain.
Shetland was actually a pretty big hit. So what do you mean nobody else watches?
Nobody here. It's like soccer. Nobody here's watching.
Where does it play here? Where do you can see it?
Get it on. Where do you watch it, Mike? On BritBox?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think you might be able to watch it on public TV or something. It's it's hard to find, but it's good stuff.
But no, that's why you're there, right? You're checking out filming locations.
Under the guise of a family
I'm here
trip?
because we got married here 25 years ago.
Oh, I thought you were in the Shetland Islands.
Well, we are. When you go to Scotland for a couple of weeks, you got to hit a few places.
Okay.
I've gone through all the taps on the Royal Mile, so now I'm hitting what they got in the other towns.
But you didn't get married in the islands. You got married in the mainland.
No. If I gotten married on the islands, I might have thrown myself over the side of a ferry, and I wouldn't have made it to 25 years.
I assume she's in the room, and you said that for her benefit.
She's on the other side of the airport, so I'm safe for now.
Wait, yeah, that's right. You're in a little tiny airport. All right. Well, go enjoy your vacation. Don't worry about us. We will be fine. We will check in with you next week. I don't know where you will be in the world.
Where will you be?
I will be in Scotland.
Okay.
Where at?
You have to tune in and find out. And I will tell you this
fascinating
much.
stuff.
Just compelling.
They serve beef burgers here. They're nowhere near as good as the Irish coffee burger.
All right, buddy. Have a good time.
Yeah, thanks for dialing in. That was exhilarating.
Yeah, if you guys want to get back, why don't you come back to me for the darts report? I think I've got some insider information. I can go on location.
So does that mean you want to talk about Ted Lasso?
No, absolutely not.
No. Let's move straight to petanque. Anybody know what the hell that is? I saw somebody playing it. I'm sure that's up next on ML.
We're going to talk about finger football.
Gross.
With the little triangle.
Is that anything like pocket pool?
Remember the little
flick football? Yeah.
Remember the little triangles that you'd make a goalpost with your hands?
Oh, I can never leave.
Goodbye.
All right.
Sean, you mentioned the fact
Have fun, sir.
that he's in. Oh, he's still talking. Hang on. Of course, he's still talking.
He's done.
I mean, we should be the ones to disconnect him. He's very proud of himself, too.
Yeah, he is. He's standing up.
Sean, do you like to do touristy sites? Do you like to do touristy things?
To some degree. Maybe not so much in Michigan State gear every day, but, to some degree.
I love doing the most common touristy things for so many reasons. I like people watching, but as I mentioned, I went to Niagara Falls, and I had to show my girls the scene from the original Superman. Do you remember that? When that boy fell and Superman saved him?
That's right.
And it did not resonate whatsoever with them. They thought it was really stupid and pointless. And why is Dad showing us this video of?
So do that on your own time.
Well, I'm trying to expand their horizons
by showing Superman.
It was a Niagara Falls scene in a movie. What's wrong with that?
Yeah,
oh, you're the worst. But the other thing, and I want to know if either of you guys have ever done this. We're up there. We just had dinner. We're walking down the street, and we're about to cross a pretty big street there, but not one of the major ones. But there's a lot of people around. I see some guy walking the other way, and I'm like, I recognize that guy. I know who that guy is. I'm going to stop and talk to that person. And it's an actor from Napoleon Dynamite, Efren Ramirez. Do you remember Napoleon Dynamite?
I do.
Vote for Pedro?
Vaguely, yeah.
And I just would never stop somebody and talk to him because I don't know. I guess I respect.
Did you know who he was, or did you say, I want to find out who this is because I recognize him?
I knew immediately who he was because we had him in studio years ago, which, unfair advantage gives me a nice reason to bring it up. And so just having to talk to him on the street, I just wondered, would you ever do that? Do you stop famous people and talk to them if you recognize? Never?
Rarely.
Why would you do that? It's like stopping a stranger.
I wouldn't stop a stranger.
I would stop a stranger, too.
I was sitting, believe it or not, was it Italy? And at the table next to me was the author, John Updike.
Yeah.
And I read all the Rabbit books, and he was one of my favorite authors. But I wasn't going to go disturb his meal and say, God, I love your stuff. And so when he walked by at the end, as he was walking out, I said, I didn't want to bother you. I just want to say that I'm a big fan, and I love so many of your books that I've read. Thank you. And he smiled a little uncomfortably and walked on, and that was all. And I figured he would like that. That's something that he wouldn't find offensive, to just not demand his time, just give him because everybody wants recognition. Everybody wants affirmation that what they do. Of course.
Sean, do you ever get stopped? Do people ever want to talk to you?
No, never.
You're such a liar. Eli, you were on TV for a long time.
One of my most embarrassing, speaking of sports writers, as you know, the great Joe Falls preceded you. I'm sure you remember him. And Joe Falls was an icon in this town long before TV people became anything of consequence. TV people really weren't of consequence, I don't think, until the video age of the 80s. So I've been on Channel 4 maybe a year or two. Maybe this is like 82 or 83. And I used to get to the ballpark early and walk in Tiger Stadium on the Cochran side, which is the third base side, and I happened to walk in one day with Joe Falls. We got there at the same time. And there's not many people in the stands. I'm walking down the third base line in front of the dugout, and people are and say, "Hey, Eli, hey, love the pregame." And I was embarrassed because I'm walking next to Joe Falls, an icon of Detroit sports writing, and here I am just emphasizing to him and the other sports writers that resented us for reasonably good reason. We were getting more attention, and they were the real journalists that had built, Detroit sports to what it was in terms of reportage all those years. And it was just a different day and time. And
see, nowadays everybody is quote unquote famous. Everybody has a camera. Everybody's filming everyone. Everyone's the star of their own movie. So now I feel like if you see a celebrity, all people do now is pull out their phone and just record them, which is awkward as hell.
Yeah, right.
Okay, Mark, I lied. I did the one time. One time I went up to a semi-celebrity. But in fairness, it was in a work environment. It was at Duke's. It was at Cameron Indoor Arena. Michigan State was playing Duke. This is, 12, 13 years ago or so. Kyrie Irving was a freshman on that team. In any case, Doris Burke was calling the game, and I was just a big fan of her. I love listening to her break down games. Basketball's by far my favorite sport.
That doesn't count.
And I walked up to her across the court. It was not far from where I was sitting, and I said, "Hey, I really enjoy listening to your broadcast and the way you break down the game." And we talked for a couple of seconds, and I moved on. So
that was a professional encounter.
Yeah, but I didn't feel like I was on her level, right? So, it felt a little bit like
you never saw The Rock, like walk by The Rock and stop The Rock?
No.
Really?
No, that's...
No.
Yeah, you got to put yourself in the other guy's shoes.
Yeah, you don't want to.
I know.
Is it all about me because I want to have a word or have him look at me and recognize me as a human being and he's so special? No, does he want to be disturbed now? Is this the right venue? Is this the right time to do it?
Right. My brother ran into Ali one time and got a photo with him.
Well, there you go.
So there you go. Right.
Well, one of my I've told you that story about my dad who goes to all the All-Star games and gets media passes. Did I ever told you that story? Who he ran into?
No.
So he's at the All-Star game in Boston years ago and sat and had this 10-minute conversation with somebody. And about 3 weeks later, he's watching TV with my mom, and he's like, "Hey, who's that guy?" My mom looks at him like, "That guy? You don't know who that is?" He goes, "Nope, who is he?" She's like, "That's Matt Damon." Oh. And he goes, I don't know who, because he does not know who anybody is. He had a 10-minute conversation with Matt Damon without knowing who he was. And I, to this day, I think Matt Damon kind of appreciated that because all they did was talk about baseball with this crazy old man who has no idea. Oh,
I'm sure he loved it. And Eli's right. I was in a Mexican place called Joe T. Garcia's out in Fort Worth one year, 20 years ago. And Peter Weller was having lunch at the table over. And when I was young, RoboCop was one of my favorite movies, set in Detroit, by the way. But I wasn't about to go over there and mess with him. I wanted him to enjoy his enchiladas in peace.
Well, if they're eating, it's different, but yeah.
If you look at it from the quote-unquote celebrity standpoint, what's interesting is that a lot of times when they're in the prime of their career and they can get no privacy and they just want to be left alone. Later on, when the game is over and there's the other guys that are getting the attention, and Aaron also ran, a lot of guys that never wanted to talk to the media, never wanted to sign autographs, suddenly become very open because we want to be remembered. We want to be significant. Everybody wants to be significant in life in some way, and when you lose that, then you welcome some recognition that you were once somebody.
Well, I'd like to recognize a supporter of the show, and that's David Hall and Hall Financial.
Segues are amazing, by the way.
I'm trying.
You couldn't have done that when you were 21 years old, like Jameson.
No, you could not have.
But now that you're an experienced veteran,
thankfully, I have a support staff like Jameson Williams has. Right?
Well, you didn't have parents?
What? No, I meant here. You. I'm talking about you and Eli and Drew and ML to a smaller point. But Hall Financial, they want to help you out. You can get equity out of your house. It's a good time to actually pull equity out, pay off some of those high interest debts that you have, or maybe upgrade your house. Of course, if you're buying a home, you got to make sure to call Hall first. Get your 5-star certified pre-approval. You got to have pre-approval. It's Hall Financial's pre-approval. They work with a lot of realtors, so they know that you are good to work with when you have that Hall Financial stamp. And right now, they're actually having a contest. If you go to callhallfirst.com/Drew, you can start your 5-minute mortgage review, and you'll be entered to win Champions Club tickets. Drew's very own Champions Club tickets. It's a pretty good deal.
It is a good deal.
Great. So check it out. Callhallfirst.com or call them 866-CALL-HALL.
Oh, man, the geeks have inherited the earth.
Did I do that?
What a dork.
Does him wanting to play with us again mean that he's turning into a geek, or we're turning into cool guys?
Did you like how I stalled so I can make sure I had the right
I thought that was beautiful, but you
What? Did I
passed
mess it
right
up?
by the main thing we were going to talk about today. I can't believe it. And we're
What?
already Geek of the Week.
What?
We wanted to get Eli's perspective. I was talking to Mike O'Hara, the great Mike O'Hara.
Yes.
Right? Longtime writers. And I asked him, I said, when was the last time you felt this kind of buzz and hype about this Lions team? And he said, to him, you could maybe argue the early 90s, but he went all the way back to the 80s with Billy Sims when they won 5 in a row. And there was that kind of, he said that team was even different than the 90s team, because the 90s team kind of came out of nowhere. But I was curious what you thought.
Well, let's go back.
It's crazy.
Let's go back. The 1980 team, after coming off a 2-14 season, I believe, in 1979, a miserable season with Gary Danielson, Eric Hipple, and Jeff Comlow was the quarterback because they all got hurt. They start out 4-0, and in the end zone after the second win, 3 great personalities, because that's teams back then had great personalities. The late James Hunter, Spider-Man Allen,
Love it,
and David Hill, did this dance in the end zone to Another One Bites the Dust.
Remember that.
And so it became, then they recorded a song, Jimmy Allen recorded a song, and the Lions were hot. They were 4-0. And then they started to get cocky, and Ronnie Clark said, please, just chill. And eventually they wound up 8-8 and never went to the playoffs. But there was excitement over that, but that didn't last. The 90s team with Wayne Fonts, I think much more so, because they actually won a playoff game. They hadn't won one since 1957. So that had been, 30-some years.
Haven't won one since.
They haven't won one since. They had Barry Sanders. They had a really incredibly popular team with some great personalities. Mm-hmm. They just didn't have a quarterback. And so I think it has been since then. Maybe there's a little excitement, when Stafford made the playoffs,
But you go out to Allen Park right now, there are national media coming on. It's a mini camp, right? I mean, it's really, really something. And I think it's because also the other pro teams have really struggled. I mean, we've been in a desert in terms of playoffs and wins in this city.
They've gotten it nationally. And it's not just local, but nationally, because the NFL, now that they're putting the Lions on all types of primetime games, because
opening up the season against Kansas City.
Suddenly we got another team that we can promote to make this a national league. That's the beauty of the NFL. What they have done, that Pete Rozelle did, is they made it a national game. You can watch the Chiefs and the Lions and be in Florida and like the game because you're familiar with these teams. They've been presented to us, whereas baseball's never been able to do it. That's why I agree with you about baseball. Baseball has a chance now, because when this whole Bally thing falls apart, they will stream the MLB will stream all the games. You can watch more out-of-town teams. Right now, you can't. If I want to see the Giants play or the Dodgers play, I can't. There's no venue for it. There's no national program. There's no, unless I buy the Major League.
That's going to mean less money, though. That's going to mean smaller player contracts going forward. So does that mean less stars?
No, but it means wider popularity.
But the Lions getting on a Thursday night game, right? Obviously, the NFL is the most popular, biggest sport in the country. But them getting on that game is because of what they did last year, and because of the personality of Dan Campbell, who would agree, and the way they play, right? So, and that's new. And we have been in a lost at sea as a professional sports town for a decade.
Oh yeah.
And if the Lions are actually going to get really, really good and be almost Super Bowl good for the first time in their history, it makes sense in a way, poetically, that they would do it to lift up the rest of the the region when all the other teams stink. In other words, they've got the stage to themselves right now.
Right, but that's not going to affect the performance of the other teams.
No. I'm just saying from a fan perspective, right?
Something to root for as to laugh.
Like if the fact that the Lions might be the one to turn this decade-long run around,
and of course
being set up for failure.
Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, they could face
spoken like a Lions fan.
No, for sure.
And the NFL, pro football is the number one sport in America.
I want to ask you that since you're the in-house historian. When did that happen? When did football blow by baseball as becoming our pastime, why?
It began. Well, the game that brought the NFL to awareness was the overtime game in 1958, the sudden death of the Colts and the Giants. Then in 1970, they created Monday Night Football, which had a huge effect. Howard Cosell and Frank Gifford, Dandy Don Meredith. So that gave the league more exposure.
But
and then
baseball still had its game of the week.
But the merger. It's really started in 1960 when the AFL came in, packed with big money. Lamar Hunt and these other owners had staying power. And again, which is what happened in LIV and the PGA this summer, you can't be a major league and not have all the best players. And so the NFL had no choice. If this league was going to stick around, we can't have them competing for our players. We can't have Joe Namath in the other league. We have to merge so that we're all one entity. They were forced into it the way the NBA was and the way the NHL was.
I would say the 80s, right?
Yeah.
Because when I was a kid in the 70s, more kids in school still talked about baseball, had baseball cards.
Yep. Well,
it was just a bigger topic of conversation. I remember the 80s is probably when it started to change.
I'm working on a theory here because growing up, too, it was always baseball and football, 1 and 2, and football at some point passed it. And I think it's because their willingness to change the rules, going back to the whole idea that we like points, we like scoring here, and the NFL's like, yeah, let's make it way easier to pass the ball. Let's open this sport up. Whereas baseball has been very, very slow to change anything. And the NBA kind of did that too, where they made it a little quicker to change to make the game. Do you think there's any validity to that? That baseball was so slow to change until the last 2 years or so?
I think the violence in football had a lot to do with it. It's just such a visceral contact,
but that's
dangerous sport. Well, it was.
What do you mean that's gone?
What do you mean?
Go stand next to
so
us.
minimalized now.
Please, not at all. Are you kidding? The hit. They used to just show the hits all the time.
The speed that they run into each other is just ungodly.
There are some skills that the average fan can never truly appreciate because they can't get close enough to the action, which is what you're saying. If you were to stand on the sidelines of an NFL game, even a Big Ten game, and listen and watch the collisions.
Absolutely, but do you think it's less violent today than it was, 30 years ago? Because I do.
There are fewer cheap shots, but it's not any less violent.
Right, it's not any less violent. But the microphones are better. The cameras are in closer.
Yeah, that's true.
Can you imagine? You couldn't imagine in 1965 having a drone be above the huddle and listen to the quarterback tell the players what they're going to do. You couldn't be right in the guy's face, the eyeballs. It was a distant type of sports. Baseball was one camera behind home plate. Yeah. But the sound and intimacy.
You're talking about the quarterback, right? And the way he's hit, for example, or some of the collisions or the blindside hits,
Well, yeah,
kind of some of that's gone, but play to play, the way that the linemen go at you, you got linebackers now that are 235 pounds that run 4.40s straight into a running back who's about the same size, running the same speed. I mean, it's
I was just asked Gary Danielson, who played 14 years in the league, to describe it. He said, we were driving the car, he said, you see that tree over there? Imagine running to that tree full speed.
It's nuts.
That's what happens.
It's incredible.
And it just gets, as the athletes get bigger and faster, those collisions just get nastier and harder.
And there's also the artistry. There's the wide receiver diving and making incredible catches, the cuts of a running back. And yet there's times on maybe a muddy day when they're on the 1 yard line and you see these 22 bodies just smash into each other and go, what an ugly pile of crap that is, just, groping and grabbing and piling up like a bunch of kids on a playground. But it's a fascinating game.
So much for my theory. Can we move on, Sean?
The cheap shots are you're talking about. They have been legislated out of the game to a large degree.
Oh yeah. It's probably a good thing. I mean, we did just see a guy die last year on the field.
All right.
which is kind of weird.
Right.
Before we move on, I want
Yes.
to bring up, before we get off this. So last night, I'm watching the Denver Nuggets win the NBA championship. And I'm looking at the coach, Michael Malone of Denver. And I say, he's Brendan Malone's kid. And so I go back and remember.
Tell the listeners who he is. Former Pistons assistant.
Bad boy
I
assistant.
was going to say, yeah. Brendan Malone, here's a guy, he started by coaching high school basketball in New York, worked his way up through all the ranks, the college assistant, this and that. Then he became Chuck Daly's assistant for 7 or 8 years, I think from 88 to, or the Pistons were 88 to 95. And then you look at his son, the way he's worked his way up, and just the history of a family that's the only father-son combination to ever coach in the NBA. So when you have a sense of history, you just see how these things fit together, and it's impressive, and how you just don't wind up at the top by accident. Most guys have to work step by step, year by year, incrementally getting higher and higher up the ladder to be in this position.
Did either of you see the post-game interview with Nikola Jokic?
Yeah, he wants to go home.
That was just the best. That was awesome. He said, ask how he felt after, it's the best player in the NBA, arguably, right now.
He's the anti-star.
He says, well, the job's done. I can go home now.
Yeah, didn't care about the parade when the parade was. He just
awesome.
Just wants to go home. And Eli, you were saying yesterday,
right?
it's crazy. He doesn't look like an athlete.
No, he's the most
look ripped.
He's the most agile, quick, smart.
The hand-eye coordination, the vision, right?
He's the most agile and skilled, clumsy-looking white guy to ever play the game.
No, it's true.
And he looks very uninterested in anything
he's softish.
that's going on.
He's softish. He's got a little bit of he doesn't have a 26-inch waist.
No.
He works out. He's incredibly conditioned, and yet he doesn't look it.
No, his arms have very little definition, right?
But he works.
So weird.
And yet, watching him play, it's just almost beautiful.
He's like a guard. I know. The incredible soft touch.
5 games, blew out the Miami Heat, and only 9 people were wounded in a shooting yesterday in the celebration. So
But the job is done. I want to go home.
To go.
The lifestyle.
Sounds like you, man after your heart, Sean.
Have you ever covered the NBA? Traveled to cover a team?
Not full time, but I've been on the road with teams. Yeah.
Yeah, the lifestyle is so incomprehensible to the rest of us. To America that gets up at 8 o'clock to get showered and go to work at 9 and come home at 5. The schedule, the road trips, the nighttime games, the afternoon flights, the morning workouts, the post-game trying to get to sleep, going to another city. It's so draining. It's so tiring. I can't even imagine what they did
all right,
back
historian.
in the old days. Yeah.
That's and here's another historian question for you.
What?
Is it easier to be an NBA player now than, say, 1980? Because you have support staffs and stuff, and load management, which is a thing now where
That's a good
players
question.
take games off.
When I started covering the Pistons in the mid-'70s, Ray Scott was the coach.
Yeah.
He had no assistant coach. He had no strength conditioning coach. He had no scouts per se. It was him in an office with a secretary and the 12 players. And to see what's happened now, where Dan Campbell has 29 assistant coaches.
Right.
In fact, the assistant coaches have assistants.
Right.
So the defensive line coach has an assistant defensive line coach. So yeah, but to your question is it harder to play? Harder to be a player? I would think that the travel alone was harder back then.
Physically, I think it's probably easier in a lot of ways, but psychologically, emotionally, just the spotlight, social media, getting trolled in airports, the expectation, having people come at you, I think that's probably harder. And players say that.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't think about that aspect of it.
That it's a lot harder just to
mentally?
Yeah.
But
players who talk about that, coaches who used to play and now are around the game as a coach, talk about the differences.
This whole thing of load management, though, like I understand it, you have this huge investment in an athlete. You don't want to burn them out. You want to keep them healthy for when it really matters, the playoffs. I mean, look at the Miami Heat. They could have been eliminated 3 times throughout this playoffs. They were an 8th seed because so many teams make it. But then again, it's bullshit because if you want to go see a guy playing a visiting team and that's their night off, you kind of screw over the fans.
Yeah, like Steph Curry, I think not this year, but last year when the Golden State Warriors were in town. He didn't play. And there were a lot of young people that had bought tickets and that's the one chance to see him. So I don't think that's fair.
Harder on the players in the old days in that they had less security. They didn't have guaranteed contracts. There's a story about Gordie Howe breaking his wrist or something in a Red Wing game and standing in the parking lot at Olympia in freezing weather with his arm wrapped, waiting for Colleen to pull the car around to take him to the hospital. So the injuries, Mark Fidrich, his career was ruined by a rotator cuff that could have been fixed with arthroscopic surgery and had him back in 8 weeks, and it cost him his career. So there was less security, there was a less support staff, there was less sports medicine. Your career could be over in a minute, and a lot of guys, you talk to the old NFL players, most of them, some of them are gone now, but the Mike Lucci's and the Joe Schmidts that played back then for $10,000 a year, and if they didn't get along and like their teammates and play for the love of the game, there was no point being there. Charlie Sanders, the Hall of Famer, quit when he had still time left on the clock because he could make more selling insurance than Russ Thomas would pay him to play tight end.
A lot of them had off-season jobs.
That's crazy. Yeah,
So-
Denny. I mean, Denny had lots of off-season jobs.
And then he blew all the money anyway.
So, by the way, who's your geek of the week? And sorry about that.
Oh, God, was I supposed to think of a geek of the week?
I got one. I'm going to do the imaging again. now.
The geeks have inherited the earth.
Did I do that?
I'm not going to go through the whole imaging. No, but because our fearless leader is gone and around Scotland, I thought I would mention a guy who you hate whenever ML mentions it, and that's Kwame Kilpatrick. And I'll tell you why he's the geek of the week. Did you see what he did this weekend?
No.
Kilpatrick was out in Beverly Hills at this 5-year anniversary for Alice Marie Johnson, who was convicted in the 90s on a couple drug crimes, right? And Kim Kardashian got her up. Very big public case. And so they had a celebration out there. And Kilpatrick was out in Beverly Hills for whatever reason, made it into the party, and then started hitting up Facebook with pictures of him and Kim Kardashian, him and Terry Crews, and writing about how it's his 53rd birthday. So because he hijacked this celebration of someone who probably got a pretty tough sentence for a drug crime and finally got out, he made it all about himself and made it all about his birthday. So that's why Kilpatrick is the geek of the week. Any objections?
No, I just got breaking news though.
What? What happened?
Mike
What?
just texted me and said they're going to a little place in Shetland where they do film the TV series, and the bus driver said that they may be filming as we speak. So he was very excited about that. I wanted to pass that along.
All right. Well, either way, Kilpatrick's the geek of the week.
Make him the geek of the last 3 decades.
Absolutely.
There's an all-night party in room 7609. And you can dance together all night if you've got the time.
Did you bring a song today, Sean?
No, because I thought you did. I gave you 3 last week.
It's always the toughest part because I'm not a new wave expert.
Aficionado.
Not much of a fan of new wave, but this is our new wave section because it's near and dear to ML's heart. So I was trying to do it thematically, looking at new wave bands from Scotland. Not that many, but Simple Minds is, which I think most people would remember. The Breakfast Club, Don't Forget About Me. But I forgot they had another massive hit. This one went all the way to number 3.
I love this song.
Do you? Okay, good. Because I like it too. But when you think of Simple Minds, I don't think you always think about Alive and Kicking.